From the Edge Media Studios in downtown Indianapolis, this is Indiana Issues. Here's your host, Abdul-Hakim Shabazz.
Hello, and welcome to Indiana Issues, the public affairs program, where we go beyond the headlines and sound bites and bringing Indiana's issues in their entirety. I'm your host, Abdul-Hakim Shabazz, the editor and publisher of IndyPolitics.org, coming to you from the Edge Media Studios in downtown Indianapolis. Well, it's the first Indiana Issues of 2021, and let's say there's no lacking for conversation. We'll be talking about the inauguration, also the governor's State of the State address, and as well as the Indiana Legislature as well. And our guests today are Republican Joy Fox, Democrat Lindsay Ships, and also our Libertarian friend Lindsay Marie. So lots of stuff to get to today on the program, ladies and gentlemen. So my friends, let's go ahead and get started. It was inauguration this week here in the country. We saw the president finally get sworn in and the president finally leave. So Joy, we'll start with you. Your thoughts on inauguration?
Well, it was a long couple months there between the election and the inauguration. I think the most important thing for the country is that it happened. It went off. It was secure. We have a new president, a new vice president. The experiment in self-government continues. We're going to have plenty to disagree on over the next 4 years, as we do every 4 years. But I'm very much looking forward to intensive policy discussion instead of a lot of what we've been dealing with the last 4 years.
Lindsay Ships, let me get your thoughts. Obviously, this is a very important week for Democrats.
It is, and more importantly, a great week for Americans. We are starting to see decisions coming out of the White House that will affect our daily lives and will help lift everyone out of this pandemic. We're hopeful to see lots of changes even as we speak. The pandemic EBT decision that's forthcoming from the White House this afternoon will put more food in Hoosiers' mouths, and that's a huge deal. So I'm definitely looking forward to it, and I know a lot of advocates as well.
Lindsay Marie, let me get your thoughts on inauguration. Like I said, you from a libertarian perspective.
So obviously, as a libertarian, I did not vote for Biden, but I do hope the best for him because he is leading our country in making decisions that affect every single American. I really hope that when it comes to criminal justice reform, we see real reform and not just mandated policies and more mandatory sentencing. So that's where I am sort of hopeful in terms of taxation and increases as far as that goes in spending. I'm not as hopeful, but I'm keeping my fingers crossed.
Joy, let me get your thoughts on the president, how the president's done so far. Like, so he's done about 27 executive orders dealing with everything from COVID-19 to rejoining the Paris Accords, which goes to deal with climate change. What is the role of Republicans for the next 4 years?
The role of Republicans the next 4 years is to be the loyal opposition and come up with an agenda that we're for, not just things that we're against. I mean, I'll tell you, right? I mean, it's very clear that a Democrat's back in the White House. I mean, within hours of being there, we're going to start using federal funding to promote abortion as family planning around the globe. Right? All of these executive orders, unprecedented, as we have every recent administration, right? Unprecedented use of executive authority that, frankly, the founders would have just been appalled by. As we go, the first of many of his executive orders were simply flip-flopping ones from President Trump that he signed early on in his administration. And so now you're going to see whether or not President Biden's going to actually try to govern from the middle, or if we'll have a situation where the tone can be very centrist and the policy fairly progressive.
Lindsay Ships, the Republicans notwithstanding, how does Joe Biden govern? Because he's always been sort of a center-left, more center, very pragmatic Democrat. He hasn't been sort of on that ideological kick.
I do think he is a pragmatic Democrat, and when it comes to it, that's the type of leadership I think we're used to here in Indiana. So I truly don't see many come to blows as you might anticipate. I do anticipate quite a even-handed governance, if you will, and I hope to see the same from the House and the Senate. As Joey said, I think it's important for us to all know what we're for, not necessarily what we're against, and hopefully that will find some cohabitation, if you will, in the Senate and the House. I'm eager to see that. It's a new game, though. We haven't had a situation like this in a long time where we've got Democrats in control of all three branches, of all three houses, if you will, the House, the White House, the House, and the Senate. So it'll be interesting to see how that works and also how state legislatures respond to it.
Lindsay Marie, let me ask you about that question about Democrats having control, basically the legislative and the executive branch of government.
I would say that they have no more excuses to get the things done that they've been talking about for the last 4 or 8 years. When it comes to criminal justice reform, when it comes to things like free speech, when it comes to things like surveillance, now is the time that they can actually do it. It's just going to be a matter of if they actually do it. We saw this with the Republicans. For years, they complained about Obamacare. Never once did they actually overturn Obamacare. They simply overturned the individual mandate. So now's the time. They either have to put up or shut up. And I'm hoping that on all these issues, they actually do go forward and make a difference.
You're watching Indiana Issues. I'm your host, Abdul-Hakim Shabazi, editor and publisher of IndyPolitics.org. Our guests on the program today are Republican Joy Fox, Democrat Lindsay Ships, and Libertarian Lindsay Marie, as we're talking about inauguration this week and also some other things, issues as well. I want to change gears a little bit and talk about the person who left the office this week. Former Vice President Donald Trump caught a flight to Mar-a-Lago. Lindsay Marie, let me start with you. Your thoughts on Donald Trump and his 4 years?
It's been a long 4 years. It kind of feels like 4 decades in a way. I think that it's very fitting and telling the way that he left office. Obviously, Nixon is the only other president to leave in that manner other than Selina Meyer. There was a part of me that was privately hoping that they would run out of gas, just like Selina Meyer did. Unfortunately, he made it all the way down to Mar-a-Lago.
Lindsay Ships, your thoughts on the former president, with or without the V preference? You can do it yourself.
I wish him best of luck in all of his trials and tribulations that the House and Senate will now bring to him, and we'll see what happens.
Joey, let me get your thoughts on Donald Trump, because one thing that someone talked about Donald Trump possibly doing now that he's out of office is forming a third party. The only folks I know who would be happy about that would be progressives and the diehard Trump supporters.
Does that heavy sigh get enough of my thoughts together here? I mean, look, if you're a Republican, you take a couple things here, right? We cut some taxes, we got some judges, take that and move on, right? This has not been good for the country. It's certainly not been good for the Republican Party. We've lost, right? We've lost the White House, we've lost the Senate, we've lost the House. Many of these preventable, in my humble opinion. Trumpism as what it is, right, is about personality. It's not ideology. There's no policy agenda, and that's not going to work for the Republican Party moving forward. We have to have an agenda that's based on opportunity for people, for families, for communities. And following a person's whims from policy to policy is just not going to do it. We've got a lot of work to do. Thankfully, there's nothing that brings a political party together more than opposition to the other political party. And so I would expect that you will start to see some coalescing behind certain policies now that the Democrats and frankly, the farther left wing of the Democratic Party exert more control over public policy making.
Lindsay Ships, let me ask you about the sort of the impeachment process. Donald Trump was actually impeached in the House of Representatives. Nancy Pelosi sent the impeachment paperwork over. What do you see happening with the impeachment process?
I don't know. Time will really tell. We'll see how the Senate handles it, and we'll see. I am certainly no expert in when it comes to inauguration protocol and policies at the Senate, at the U.S. at the federal government level. But I'll be honest with you, from an unstudied viewpoint, I think it's a really incredible way to teach your kids about government. You've got a lot of you get a lot of questions from your kids about what it means when a president is impeached, and these are interesting studies to embark on as a family, but also as a community. And I truly, truly hope that whatever happens throughout this whole process, that we get some finalization out of this as a country. We need to move forward. I think it's important to talk about how we move forward beyond this, but also hold our leaders accountable for the decisions they have made, and also for the decisions that were a part of the elected officials in our Senate and our House who who were part of those decisions and part of those happenings that led to this point. So I think it's a really important process that we all hold each other accountable, and that our constituency does that as well.
Lindsay Marie, let me ask you, because also part of that impeachment process, if the president is convicted and they have to find 17 Republicans to go along with that, there'll be a second vote, which just takes a simple majority to ban the president, the former president, Donald Trump, from ever holding public office again.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because there's a fine line between justice and vengeance. And if this is about actually achieving justice, that's one thing. But if it's going after a political enemy and trying to secure that he cannot run again in 4 years, that's a different kind of deal. This is going to take a lot of time away from these members voting on bills that could pertain to COVID, to things that pertain to everyday life. If it's taking them out of things like that, and it's going to cost a lot to the American taxpayers, I think they really need to take a hard look at, is the juice worth the squeeze? Are these people seeking vengeance or justice? And is the end going to be better for all of the American people?
Joey, let me get your response as a Republican.
Gosh, I would imagine here, based on the polling that I've seen, that I'm going to be in the minority in my party on this, Abdul, but I don't think that former President Trump is fit to hold office. I just don't, and I would be supportive of barring him from holding so much as a congressional seat in the future. I don't think that he should be able, nor is he fit to do so. I think we have to have some baseline of respect for the Constitution and for our processes, and a little knowledge of the Constitution is helpful as well. And I just don't think that has been demonstrated here and resulted in loss of life.
You're watching Indiana Issues. I'm your host, Abdul-Hakim Shabazz, the editor and publisher of IndianaPolitics.org. Our guests on the program today are Republican Joy Fox, Democrat Lindsay Ships, and Lindsay Marie, Libertarian. Also, folks, this week, Pete Buttigieg, former mayor of South Bend, former presidential candidate, making his way through the process to become the next Secretary of Transportation. Lindsay Ships, Pete Buttigieg got a lot of praise and compliments from that committee today.
He did. He got compliments, bipartisan comments that support his nomination, and I'm eager to see how this all shakes out on the Senate vote. I myself wrote Senator Braun today asking for him to support the nomination of Pete Buttigieg as the Secretary of DOT. I think he's a fantastic and capable leader, and I'm certain that Senator Young believes that, as you could see by his introduction of Pete during the committee hearing yesterday in Senate Commerce. I'm hopeful that Senator Braun does the same and chooses to support him.
Lindsay Marie, let me get your thoughts on Pete Buttigieg as Secretary of Transportation.
Well, I differ with him on policy positions when it comes to raising the gas tax at the federal level and also the Jones Act. He said that both of those things, he said he is in favor of the Jones Act. He also said that he is not taking anything off the table when it comes to raising the federal gas tax, even though he admits it would disproportionately affect those in the lower income class. Honestly, though, I think that any other Democrat that Biden would put up would probably be in favor of doing that and would probably support the Jones Act. So unfortunately, I don't think I'm going to be happy as a libertarian no matter who he nominates. But those are things where I think conservatives are definitely going to come out and speak out against him.
Joy, let me ask you, as a Republican, once again, like I said, a lot of bipartisan support for Pete Buttigieg.
I think transportation secretary is one of those positions where it behooves most politicians to be as supportive as you can be. This is a position with, gajillions, I think is the technical term, gajillions of dollars to hand out like Santa Claus across the country for transportation projects. And it's probably helpful to you as a politician to be on the good side of the transportation secretary, so you can come and get your picture taken, cutting a nice ribbon on an infrastructure project before your next election. I think, the mayor and soon-to-be secretary, and I of course disagree on lots of issues, but I think he's a serious guy. I think he'll take running his department seriously. But I would expect this isn't going to be one of the nominations that just gets sandbagged on the other side.
Lindsay Ships, before we take our break, let me get your thoughts on some of the criticism lobbied against the mayor, which was just that. It was the mayor of a medium-sized city here in the state of Indiana. Not a lot of global, sort of worldwide experience, and they're going to put him in charge of the roads for all of America, not just the roads, excuse me, but also the airplanes, the rails, shipping, the whole transportation lot. How do you respond to that?
I find a lot of the concerns that have been echoed from the right as unfounded. Pete has not only proven himself as a transit user, which is exceptionally helpful to have. It's great to be an advocate for these rail projects or for these transit projects, or for example, the bus rapid transit here in Indianapolis. It's really hard to be an advocate for that and make everyone happy unless you've actually used those infrastructure initiatives. And Pete proves that he is yet again a capable and willing and ready and intelligent leader for these types of initiatives. And transit advocates across the state and nation are applauding him. So I find the criticism unwarranted and frankly just kind of waved at him from the right with no heat or any merit.
You're watching Indiana Issues. I'm your host, Abdul-Hakim Shabazz. When we come back, we'll talk about the governor and his State of the State address, and also what's been going on in the Indiana legislature. We're back with our panel in just a bit. And welcome back to Indiana Issues. I'm your host, Abdul-Hakim Shabazz, the editor and publisher of IndyPolitics.org. Our guests on the program today, Republican Joy Fox, Democrat Lindsay Ships, and Libertarian Lindsay Marie. My friends, we saw this week the governor deliver his State of the State address. Actually, a little bit different State of the State address because it was actually recorded and virtual due to the global pandemic and COVID-19. But it still didn't have the governor. He still talked about the state's response to COVID-19 and also outlined some of his new programs in the process. Joy, we'll start with you. How do you think the governor did?
The governor did a great job. One kind of just technical piece for all the nerds out there is because there was no extended applause and standing ovations and all that. I think this may have been one of the longest, at least in terms of word count, State of the State addresses in a long time, fit in the same time period. On content, I think there were two things that stuck out most to me. Number one, continued progress with infant mortality in the state, thanks to work that started, frankly, under the Pence administration years ago. We now have the best recorded levels of infant mortality. We are saving more babies by their first birthday. Adoptions, especially from those from foster care, continue to be at records. And finally, the governor making a huge push into the nursing home space and saying that the process we're using and the system that we have in the state is not working, and that he wants more people to be able to age at home and receive care at home and not in nursing homes. And I think that's going to be a big battle with the legislature for sure. And in full disclosure, I do have clients in that issue, but it's a major policy matter that now will be debated in the legislature.
Lindsay Ships, your thoughts on the governor's State of the State address this past week?
Well, I want to be as positive as possible, but Joey brings up a very salient point in that aging at home is not a priority of the governor's in his budget. He has taken out choice funding by $5 million, which means 2,000 Hoosiers don't have that care anymore in their home to be able to age safely in their home instead of being slammed into a nursing home. So that's a priority for the governor that he has to yet work on. I certainly hope the House Republicans plus that budget up in their markup of that bill. Here I am talking like a federal lobbyist right now, working on an appropriation. But when they do publish, their final House Bill 1001, it'll be interesting to see whether or not that choice funding, that community home options for to institutionalized care is plussed up to the original funding, if not more, so we can get more Hoosiers served and allow them to age in their home instead of the nursing home. So once again, we've balanced the budget on the backs of Hoosier seniors and disabled folks, and I really hope that changes.
Lindsay Marie, your thoughts on the governor and the State of the State address?
I thought it was interesting that he kept talking about how resilient our state is and how we just need to keep going. And I hope that he holds true to that sentiment and that he allows businesses to keep operating as the months go on. I'm worried that at some point in the future, he's going to go ahead and institute another lockdown, which we've seen has been detrimental to so many Hoosiers, their businesses, and their families. Different areas of the state have been impacted differently by COVID. And I think that each area needs to decide for their area what makes sense for them. And I think that's something that really is going to be an issue coming soon.
Joy Fox, something else the governor did, it was almost like he gave sort of two State of the State addresses, one focusing on COVID-19 and the coronavirus, and what Indiana has gone through. And then the other part, sort of his next level agenda, including bringing back almost sort of the old regional cities initiatives that lawmakers funded for a year and then stopped funding.
Well, I think you've seen multiple iterations of regional cities, right, and called a couple of different things. It's clearly the policy of the state of Indiana that we develop regionally. You see that even through the Indy Chamber here centrally, right, where they now include the mayors of Greenwood and Fishers and Carmel, right, are all included in a regional development strategy. You see this in Fort Wayne and in the north central part of the state. You see this in Evansville. It is a fact now that if we are going to be able to bring our more rural counties, ex-urban and rural counties and communities forward at not the same rate, but along with the growth of the metros, you're going to have to include them in the strategy, right? And find a way to make the quality of place and quality of life there conducive so that you don't have everybody clustered into the very center of these metros, but you have development that is somewhat fair across the state. But you know what? If you're a young person, you've got to have things in rural places and ex-urban places that attract you there for schools and families and amenities.
Lindsay Ships, are we doing enough to attract that young talent that's needed to get Indiana to grow?
No, we're not. We're not doing enough at all. And it doesn't matter if you live in a rural or urban or ex-urban area, we're not doing enough to attract new Hoosiers to the state. And it's important to do that, not only to attract revenue streams the state critically needs, but also to reinvest in this state and bring future leaders here and not just rely on everyone who currently lives here, but be attractive to new. And so I think that's really important, especially when you're talking about the federal transit dollars that you were just describing. I think, Joey, you said gajillions. I think that's not inaccurate. But those types of investments, when transit comes to a city, everything comes beyond that. All these decisions are made based on that. And so when you have reinvestment like that, you need to make sure that you double down and make it attractive for those communities around you and be supportive of those initiatives with all those federal dollars that come trickling into Indiana for free. And I know that'll tee up Lindsay Marie's next comment.
Well, Lindsay Marie, go right ahead.
I'm going to pass on that one, but I will say anecdotally, a friend of mine from DC is actually visiting Indiana this week to decide if he wants to move here or not. He doesn't have family here. He doesn't have necessarily a job that would bring him here. The reason is because the income tax rate is so much lower than what he's paying now. He's looking at Anderson, Elkhart, different areas the next couple of days. And I find that interesting because I would have never thought that. Doesn't seem like something that would really bring a lot of people here, but it surprisingly actually is. Also, compared to other places he looked at, he thought that he would have more freedom in the state of Indiana. So to some extent, there are a few things I think working in favor of the state, but in terms of, huge projects that are going to bring people here by the hordes, I don't think that's going to happen right now.
You're watching Indiana Issues. I'm your host, Abdul-Hakim, the editor and publisher of IndyPolitics.org. We've got a few minutes left, folks. I want to make sure we get in our final topic, the Indiana Legislature. Legislature was closed down this week for a couple of days due to possible threats and public safety, but otherwise, they seem to be moving along quite well. Lindsay Marie, let me start with you. How do you think lawmakers are doing right now?
I think they're very busy right now, and they're trying to get as much done as they can in the short amount of time that they do have. I'm hopeful about a couple of bills that are already in the works. One from Senator Melton, which is to ban no-knock warrants. Senator Italian also introduced her cash bail bill again this year, which would affect those facing misdemeanors. So I am hopeful about some of those, but I have seen some issues where they're trying to now go ahead and require more licensing for more occupations, which I'm very much against. So I think it's just going to be a give and take on what I think is going to be good for the state and then what I think will actually end up getting passed.
Lindsay, let me get your other thoughts on how well you think lawmakers are doing. What are they missing, or is it still early?
It is still early. We're in technically the third week, but the week was canceled due to these concerns with the inauguration security. So I'm certain that we'll obviously have the next slate and next batch of committee announcements that are being announced even as we speak, get us started on a very quick week next week for week 4. But yeah, we do still have a lengthy session ahead in front of us, and we've got a lot of issues yet to tackle. The budget being number one, obviously. Education spending, House Bill 1005, awful bill that's going to take money out of other important COVID initiatives and put it into vouchers, which is just mind-boggling to me in the middle of a pandemic. But those initiatives, as well as possibly a veto override of Senate Enrolled Act 148 from last year, these which deals with a very important housing issue that the governor had such great forethought in vetoing, that could be up here as well. So they've got a big batch of stuff in front of them, and I certainly hope that we move through expeditiously, but with the public in mind.
Joey, let me get your thoughts. What are lawmakers getting off on the right track on? What are they maybe making a misstep?
I was thinking about what's the same and what's different. And I think besides the location being a little bit different this year, the House is meeting in the Government Center instead, and some of the committee rooms being different. And the number of overall bills that have been filed is somewhat less than what you would usually see in a long session. I've been struck by how normal this session has felt as far as pacing, as far as prioritization. I think that despite the fact that we may see one or two shutdowns due to a COVID outbreak, right, which you can just, which I think isn't beyond the realm of possibility here. Besides that, I have a feeling this session is going to continue fairly normally. I think you're going to see deadlines stay pretty similar, and then we'll get to the end here. From a policy perspective, the caucuses are putting out their priorities. I think what you're seeing is continued responsible leadership from the Republicans that are in charge of both of the chambers. Right, we're going to have budgets that are balanced, that restore our reserves, which came in really handy when we had a once in a 100-year pandemic attack us last year. I think you're going to see the promises kept for teachers and for education and funding of students instead of systems. So I'm very optimistic that this session will carry on. We'll get the people's business done.
Lindsay Chips, let me get your thoughts on it real quick. Something Joy said about maybe session being shut down for maybe another week or two due to COVID-19. You used to work in that building in the House of Representatives. Do you see COVID coming in and closing things down for a week or two?
It very well could happen. There are legislators that refuse to wear masks to this day, and I'm sure there's probably some staff members that don't wear them either. But I will tell you, the staff that I have talked to definitely are feeling the pressure with being in a work environment where you're forced to be in the same room, much less the same desk, while you're working on a bill with a legislator who refuses to wear a mask. So I really don't feel for any of my former colleagues at the State House having to deal with that situation. I certainly hope that we don't have an outbreak. That would be horrible for any circumstance. And I hope we continue to move forward in a way that benefits Hoosiers and continues to put public testimony as a priority. And that currently cannot happen remotely. It can only happen in the building. So you're putting immunocompromised people at peril if they decide to testify. They do so at their own risk, which is unfortunate.
We're at the last section of our program. We do our predictions and prognostications. And so, Joy, we'll start with you. What should we look out for?
Well, the old 2024 primary has already started on the Republican side. Right, we're looking at who's going to be running for governor. I think you have Suzanne Crouch, you have state party chairman Kyle Hupfer said to be looking at a possible run. I think you can expect the Attorney General Todd Rokita and maybe the former Attorney General Curtis Hill all getting in. It could be a very interesting primary going into 2024. I would be watching travel schedules very closely as we start heading towards that.
Lindsay Ships, what do you see coming down the road?
Well, I'd be very interested in watching that Republican primary, obviously. But I think more importantly, some of those state legislative races, you'll see some primaries again with this continued mask quote mandate or suggestion, if you will, being of issue, and state and liberty and issues of freedom become issues in Republican primaries more so than you'll see in Democrat primaries. I think it'll be really interesting to see how the state legislature survives the supermajority survives or doesn't survive throughout these questions. And you've got a definite divide in the Republican Party. So I'll be interested to watch it, and I will sit back with some popcorn and watch it myself.
Lindsay Marie, give you the last word.
Well, I'm definitely watching the Libertarian Party's membership and the affiliates for the next couple months. It's very interesting what's happening. The amount of affiliates that they have that are new for counties this year is growing very, very quickly. Overall, at the United States, the Libertarian Party is the fastest growing party, the only growing party. So it's only a matter of time, I think, in certain counties, in certain areas that you see the party become the second party. We even saw with Rainwater, he came in second in many counties ahead of the Democrats. So Don Rainwater said he's going to run again in 2024. So we'll see what happens and if he can capitalize on what he did last time.
All right. Well, our guests today have been Republican Joy Fox, Democrat Lindsay Ships, and Libertarian Lindsay Marie. I'm your host, Abdul-Hakim Shabazz, coming to you from the Edge Media Studios in downtown Indianapolis. That'll do it for this edition of Indiana Issues. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.